Welcome to the Refurbishment Mastery podcast with me, Martin Rapley. If you're a property investor who is worried about paying too much for your next property, concerned that you don't know how to manage a refurb, or scared that you will be ripped off by a builder, then this is for you. In this podcast, I share over 30 years of experience of managing refurbishments and conversions to help you make more profit, save your time, and ultimately enjoy the process. On with the podcast. So, good evening and welcome to tonight's webinar. This is one of a webinar series. I tend to do a webinar most months. So you're really welcome if this is your first monthly webinar, or indeed whether you've been to plenty of those over the time. And I'll be here for the next hour or so. There's approximately an hour's worth of content. So you can plan other things from somewhere around about 8:30 or so. I'm talking tonight about commercial to residential conversions. Now, this is something that has got more and more prolific over my time working with property investors. It was a strategy that came about in 2013, actually, which was exactly where I were at the time. I was taking some training in property investing through Simon Zucchi's PIN organisation. So it was a brilliant opportunity that came about in my early career as a property investor. And in fact, we picked up a property in Maidstone shortly after the first relaxation of the regulations relating to commercial to residential conversions. And over the years, more and more planning legislation has become relaxed, shall we say, relating to commercial to residential conversion. So there's more and more opportunities as time goes on. So, and in reality, this today's webinar is about giving you the confidence that you can, convert commercial buildings into residential, even if your experience today is only residential, maybe smaller projects. It's not beyond you. You do need a little bit of time. And as you'll see from what I'm going to talk about, there's some things you need to know, but it's not impossible. The image on the screen is actually the first commercial to residential conversion I did back in 2014. The lower ground floor was a shop when we bought it. It had flats upstairs, and then the little yellow building on the right hand side was connected through. That was all part of the shop as well. And we split that yellow building out and converted that into a little 2-bedroom house with a little yard as a garden. Didn't have a lot of space, but we got a little yard. And then the lower part that was the shop got converted into 2 1-bedroom flats. And then we refurbished and reconfigured the flats upstairs. They were a bit of an odd layout. The staircase was enormous. We put a smaller staircase in to get better space within the flats. And this is, that may be something that is well within your capabilities. You could potentially have found a property where the upstairs is already in pretty good shape. Maybe there's nothing to do there. And the thing about a scheme like this, and the reason we were attracted to it in the first place, is there were tenants paying rent from day one. So although we had a shop downstairs that was empty, and although we engaged builders and we were designing this conversion and managing that through, the good thing was every single month the rent from 4 flats arrived in our bank, which meant it took an enormous amount of risk away from the project. And that is one of the things that you do need to be aware of. For those of you that don't know me, my background is construction. I left school I left school 40 years ago. We are now at 40 years. And I'd finished my A-levels, and I took a job with a building contracting business in London. In fact, I started in September, so it's just a little bit short of 40 years. And I took a job as a quantity surveyor. Now, the quantity surveyor is the person who looks after the finances for the project, excuse me, on behalf of my employer, which was the building contracting business. Um, as part of that role, I was involved with sourcing contractors to do the work, managing their accounts, making sure that we got paid by our clients. In reality, 40 years ago, I was based on a big site up in West London. I built, or was part of the team that built 24 luxury apartments in Chelsea. Um, and my job was making the tea, answering the phone, getting the sandwiches for the meeting. You can imagine those kind of first things that you do in your first job. The thing was, I had time to be on site. I had time to talk to the tradesmen, and I fell in love with this whole concept that we could take one thing and convert it or build it out as something else. And in fact, what had happened on that particular site was it had been a petrol station, and our client had bought the petrol station, removed all of that, got planning permission to build out these flats, and then engaged with the business I work for to to build these flats from scratch. My career, I went to several other contractors, and then I drifted into project. Well, I did a bit of estimating and drifted into project management. And so, really, for the last 25 plus years, I've been pricing, delivering, looking after the finances, and ensuring that projects are delivered on time and on budget, which is what we all aim to do. For the last 12 years, I've been working with property investors, sharing that knowledge with property investors, really from the context that on smaller projects that you guys are doing, you probably can't afford a project manager. And therefore, you probably need to be the project manager yourself. And I'm here to support property investors just like you, sharing my knowledge, my advice to ensure that you become a really successful project manager and get as much pleasure from creating property as I have in my 40 years. And as it says on the screen, the key thing here is we need to have some kind of process to follow. And everything I talk about is part of that process in one way or another. I have said that I'm recording this webinar tonight, but I'm not putting it out into the public domain. It's for my own use, so that I can just see how I'm coming across, and I can probably also then take some video shorts from it for social media. If you've got any questions, then please just drop me an email. That email address will come up on other slides as well. You can drop me an email during the call or afterwards. I won't answer them probably till tomorrow, but I will get back to you if you've got any questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, because really there are so many nuances in what I'm talking about that you may not see the connection between one thing I'm saying and how it perhaps relates to you. So I don't mind if you ask me questions at all. So let's crack on with commercial to residential conversions. And really, I want to share with you the 5 biggest mistakes that I see property investors regularly make when it comes to these kinds of projects. And sadly, some of these investors are already a long way down the line before they come to me for help. I would really like to get them the message out that I'm here to help before you even start, perhaps before you even buy the property, because that's actually the first mistake I want to talk about. Um, just because there is permitted development, that's what PD stands for. Just because there is permitted development, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is a really good scheme here. So be very careful getting sucked into this thing that some other trainers will tell you, oh, well, it's permitted development, just buy it, you'll make money. You will not always make money. So go in with your eyes wide open. Let me give you some let me give you some other things to think about. Um, there are restrictions under how you can convert properties under permitted development. Not everything that you might want to do is actually covered by permitted development. And therefore, your scheme may be compromised if you only use the permitted development elements. The common mistake that I see here is that we end up with properties with insufficient windows or poor layouts of windows, because under permitted development, you are not allowed to put any new windows into the building. And some buildings need more windows, depending on what the use is at the moment. it may not need windows in the back of it. If you've got a shop with storage at the back, there may not be any need for windows at the back. Well, you probably need windows if you're going to put a bedroom at the back of the property. So do be very careful that permitted development does not cover absolutely everything. In theory, if you've got a shop with a shop front and you want to put an extra door in that so you can perhaps get a staircase to go upstairs, that is all that all needs planning permission in most circumstances. So you do need to be very, very careful. And I'm not saying don't go and get planning permission, but of course, anything that needs planning permission is a little bit more risky. And ultimately, then it's not permitted development. Be very, very careful about really deep properties, properties that were have been extended and extended a couple of times. You can very easily find huge amounts of floor area with no scope for windows, and you end up with really odd, compromised properties as a result. So do be very, very careful that not everything that the estate agents will tell you would convert is actually the best thing to convert. Remember that estate agents are there to find a buyer of the property on behalf of their client, who is the vendor of the property. So, to some extent, estate agents will tell you whatever they think you need to hear to make an offer for this particular building. They don't necessarily know all of the permitted development rights. They don't necessarily know what makes a good deal for you, and they don't necessarily even understand the process of carrying out the conversion works. So do your due diligence, go very carefully with everything you are told. And if necessary, if you want to get advice as to whether something you want to do is actually likely to be permitted development, you can obviously trawl through the planning portal. And if you just Google for the planning portal, you will find that. And there's lots of good, pretty clear advice on there, actually. There is some images, and you can click on parts of it and it will tell you what's permitted development and what's not. Or, of course, you could get hold of a planning consultant. And most planning consultants will give you a free 15-20 minute call just to give you a basic overview of the likelihood of a potential scheme. So, if it's a simple question about is this likely to be permitted development, or can I do XYZ under permitted development, that's no reason not to have that call. And in fact, even if you've got to pay for that call, is it not better to pay a few £100s now to get clarity before spending perhaps a few £100,000 now buying the wrong property, which sadly people do. And I know that because they come to me later on for some help. And sometimes my first thought is, oh my word, you've bought the wrong property at the wrong price. And that's what I said earlier on. I'm all about helping you not get it wrong through lack of knowledge. So do be very careful. Just taking what the estate agents say on face value. If they say it can be converted for £50,000, do some research, double check those numbers are right. If they say the property, once it's converted, is going to be worth £200,000, do some research, check that's right. Check that the £50,000 cost of work is commensurate and comparable with the £200,000 of value. Sometimes estate agents will tell you the bare minimum low grade conversion, and then they'll give you the value based on the penthouse style Rolls Royce conversion, and the two don't tie up. So you need to do all of your own research. And remember that because we're converting commercial buildings to residential, we have to comply with large elements of the building regulations. And the things that are particularly expensive in there relate to fire regulations, acoustic insulation, and thermal insulation. Most other things can be dealt with reasonably easily, but those three elements particularly can massively increase the cost. And unfortunately, even if this building that you're looking at converting was built as a house in the first place, and let's say it was built as a house many years ago, and then more recently, someone's come along and converted it into an office, and now, there's been, say, an accountant running their business in there, and the accountant's now selling that, even though it was a house perhaps 50 plus years ago. The fact that you are converting it from commercial to residential, you need to comply with today's building regulations, which are way more onerous than they were 50 plus years ago when the property was first built. So you do need to be really, really careful that you are factoring in the costs to comply with today's building regulations. And as I say, even if some of these rooms would look like a living room and a dining room and a kitchen, when you convert them, you can't necessarily just go in, put some new units in, paint it all out, put some carpet down, and move on. You will be forced to comply with the building regulations, which predominantly is fire, safety, and thermal insulation. Remember, a lot of these old buildings didn't have insulation in the walls or the ceilings to the standard that we need in residential units. So do be very, very careful with that. The building regulations for even modern commercial buildings are nowhere near as onerous as residential buildings, because people aren't living in commercial buildings. They're using them during the day for work, but the door gets open, people come and go. You don't necessarily have to be, you're not sleeping in the building or anything like that. So you've got very different regulations. So make sure that you're aware that you have got to upgrade the specification, and that will cost you money. Now, the other thing to be really sure about is that the numbers stack up. And that kind of comes back to what I was saying previously, because this is the next mistake. Is actually paying too much money for the deal in the first place. So, make sure that you're aware of what you need to do to the property to comply with those building regulations and to deliver the property that you want to deliver. And remember that you need to be thinking about, what is that property you're going to deliver? What is the market that you're delivering to? Are you delivering something that's going to work for serviced accommodation? Are you working with holiday lets? Are you working with social housing, HMOs, or at the top end of the market, creating luxury flats for retirees or whatever? So make sure you know what you're aiming for, and that you're putting together a budget for that market that you're actually aiming to. And you need to ensure that you're using realistic numbers for your budget. So plucking numbers out of the sky is not satisfactory. Remember, this is a slightly bigger project than perhaps converting a house into an HMO. This is a little bit more complex than converting a house into an HMO. It's more complicated than refurbishing an existing property. And so as we get bigger projects, those projects get a little bit more risky, and we need to be more watertight with our numbers. If you slip up on the numbers for a small flip project, you may have to rent it for a little bit longer. You may not be able to get all of your money out when you refinance. You might have to forego the summer holiday, but it probably isn't serious money. As we're talking about bigger projects here, if you start to slip up too badly on the numbers, you'll find that they run into tens of thousands, and that's not good for any of us. That sets everyone back massively if we get these numbers wrong. So do make sure that you are working on or using realistic numbers for to appraise how much you can pay for this property. And notice that I say that you calculate how much you can pay for this property. That is actually called the residual value. So we completely ignore the price that the property is on the market for, and we work backwards to work out how much we can actually offer for the property. And the thing with commercial properties is they are very, very hard for anyone to value. because they've got different values to different people. They've got a different value for someone like us that wants to convert it to residential than someone who wants to use it as an office or as a commercial unit as it was originally built. But even people like us, there's a different value if it's going to be used as an HMO from if it was going to be used for 4 flats, as if it was going to be converted into 3 houses or whatever, all these different options you could do. So you need to calculate the residual value for you. And the residual value starts from the end gross development value. So what is this property going to be worth when it's all finished? And then we deduct from that the cost of delivering that project, 20 to 25% profit, the cost of buying or the costs of buying the property, not the actual purchase price, but solicitors and legals and stamp duty and things like that. There's going to be some costs for financing. We're likely to need some consultants as well. So we take our gross development value, we deduct all of those figures off. And the figure we're left with in surveying terms, in Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors terms, is the residual value. And that is the most you should ever be paying for the property. So I would then take something off and make an offer low, and then you've got a little bit of margin there to negotiate. Because these properties are even harder to compare than the average residential house, you cannot start anywhere near the asking price. You've got to do your due diligence and work from the end price and work backwards to ensure that you are not overpaying for the deal. And ultimately, you need to have some kind of deal appraisal sheet that you can plug these numbers into. There's a little bit more detail needed here. I've given you some of that overview. Here's my deal appraisal sheet. By all means, take a screenshot of that if you want to. It'll work as a bit of a crib sheet for the kinds of things that you need to be thinking about and how long how long things are going to take, and therefore how much the finances. If Excel, I love Excel, by the way. If Excel's not your thing, you may need a quantity surveyor. You may need someone else that can do numbers for you. You may be able to work with someone as a bit of a partnership. Perhaps you're really good at finding deals and not so good with the numbers, where there's someone else who's really good with numbers, not so good at finding deals, or doesn't have the time to find deals. So, use other people if you need to ensure that you put together a realistic appraisal. Because the thing about a lot of deals, and I've learned this over the years, whether this is commercial to residential or any kind of deal, is if you're seeing enough deals and making enough offers that are normally quite low, you'll get to a point where you'll have inquiries come back about offers you made 6 months ago. And if you haven't got decent records of what you saw 6 months ago and how you stacked the deal up 6 months ago, then who can say where you are and whether whether you can move forward with that. So my advice is always to take really good notes, put together a good schedule of works, make sure you're totally clear with your aims for the particular property. And I always make notes on the bottom of my spreadsheets as to where I've got things from and what I'm thinking about, to make sure that I understand where I'm going. Because particularly 6+ months later on, in fact, that first one I showed you, the commercial to residential image that I showed you, that must have taken 8 months plus to get over the line. From when I first saw it and first started talking to the owner of the building, and he didn't want to sell. And then we found a way of giving him a bit more money, and and it took a long time. So it's good to have all of this written down. But if you've got an Excel spreadsheet that gives you that residual value, that best price to buy for, then you now know what figure you must not go over. And if you do go over it, that's when you're going to start having problems. You're eating into your profitability, you're eating into your risk and contingency money. And in the worst case, you're getting to a point where no one will lend you any money to do the conversion works, because you've created too much risk by not building enough float into the numbers in the first place. So do be very, very careful and ensure that you are stacking these deals properly and thinking things through properly, taking into account the fact that these projects are more expensive to deliver than a lot of your house. Even if you took a house and converted that into flats, it will be cheaper to convert a house into flats than a commercial unit of the same size into flats, because the building regulations are going to be more onerous. If you've got a house into flats, then it's residential to residential. And whilst there's still some fire regulations to deal with them and some acoustic, we don't need to spend as much money on the thermal insulation. Whereas with commercial, we've definitely got that upgrade that we need to consider as well. Now, if you haven't picked up already, there are elements of these projects that are more complex than, again, converting a residential house. They're not so complex that none of you can manage it, but there's other things that you need to be thinking about and that you need to be aware of. And significantly, you my advice is, do not be afraid to pay for the right people to give you the right information, because guessing on these kinds of kind of the next level up kind of projects is a risky strategy. And unfortunately, and I say this from experience, not my own personal experience, but the experience of working with property investors over the years, unfortunately, trying to save money and work things out for ourselves does not, in the long term, save money. Something will come back and bite you. So don't be afraid to employ consultants to help you get these projects right. Whether those are consultants early on to help you ensure you're buying the right property, to help you understand the condition of the existing property, to help you be clear that you can get permitted development, that if it needs some planning, that there's a likelihood of getting that. And other specialist things, like structural engineers, to ensure that it's, that little crack up the front isn't anything significant that we need to be concerned about. So, do be aware that you are likely to need some consultants in here. And remember that consultants come with a cost, and you need to be factoring that into the budget that I was talking about a few minutes ago. So make sure that you use consultants to save you time and money. Look at it from that perspective. If you need to present some kind of paperwork, some kind of report, then the experts know how to write those and how to deliver those, and they come with the right qualifications that demonstrate they know what they're doing. So if you have to provide a report that to say demonstrate that there is that you can manage, shall we say, contamination within the building, bearing in mind the building might have had some kind of prior use that was more of an industrial type use, then you may need to provide a report to say that, well, if we find any contamination, this is how we're going to deal with it. Now, you might be able to use ChatGPT and get some of that right. The challenge is, if you present that to the people that matter, they're going to say, no one who knows what they're talking about has actually put together this report, therefore we don't accept it. The consultants that you're going to be working with have been doing these reports. They've been giving advice, perhaps as long as me, for 40 plus years. And they know the shortcuts. They know how to present it in such a way that it will just be tick, 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 tick. Yes, off you go. You probably won't know most of that. And whilst you might think you can do it, ChatGPT is the key thing here. I guarantee in a lot of cases, you will come a cropper somewhere. You will catch a cold. And I have unfortunately met property investors who have tried to save time and money, and ultimately it's backfired. I had someone, actually, they engaged me to write a report. They paid me for a telephone consultation. They wanted me to talk them through this report that they needed to present. And it wasn't a report that even I could present. It was actually all to do with contamination. And sadly, this particular person had already started removing contaminated soil from the backyard of a commercial building, and had effectively had an injunction served on them. And they wanted me to help them defend it. I couldn't defend it. I returned their fee in the end because I couldn't help them. I was not the right expert for that. My expertise is quantity surveying, as I said, numbers, costings, and how to deliver projects, not contaminated land. That's a very, very different subject. So don't be afraid to use experts. They will help you in the longer term. And make sure that those experts help you understand the conditions of the permitted development. Because even though permitted development is a great thing, and it has opened up a lot of opportunities, permitted development does have some minimum requirements. You do need to demonstrate that the property is not in a flood zone. So who's going to do that? Well, it's going to have to be some kind of environmental specialist who can pull off all the relevant details relating to floods in their area. You do need to show that if there's a lot of noise from a road, a railway, if there's likely pollution from roads or railways or even other industry, that you are protecting the people living in the property. You may need to be thinking about acoustic glass. You may need to think about sealing the windows up and putting in an air conditioning and heating system inside. And you need to submit that information as part of your permitted development application. So remember, there are specialists that are going to help you discharge some of these permitted development conditions that you have got to do to get your permitted development case through the system. So don't feel that you need to do all of that yourself, but do be prepared to pay for it. Do factor it into your budget, as I mentioned earlier on. And then remember that the experts that you engage should have professional indemnity insurance. And that professional indemnity insurance means that if they mess up with the information they give to you and it's detrimental to your project, you could claim on their insurance for your losses. Effectively, by them getting involved with things, they are taking away your risks. And in reality, no expert is going to do something, or certainly not set out to do something, that is potentially going to jeopardize their professional indemnity insurance. Some people ask me to do things, and I say I am not insured to do that. I'm insured for doing quantity surveying, budgetary work, and teaching how to deliver projects. That is my expertise. So when you employ the right experts, they take an enormous amount of risk away from you, because they're not going to do things incorrectly. And by the way, if they do, they've got professional indemnity insurance to give you, to pass on that peace of mind, so that that if something does go wrong, that you are protected in the event. But the likelihood is, if you engage the right consultant or consultants, you shouldn't really have anything going wrong. So just think about how much can you do and how much can't you do. And to some extent, what you can't do is the element here. Think about what you can't do and be prepared to outsource that. Because in reality, that ties up with the next thing that I see property investors doing is, I said these projects are perfectly doable by you guys, and they absolutely are. I've worked with a lot of property investors over the years that have delivered projects, some nice commercial to residential conversions. Let's jumping in to make sure that you have everything you need. Now, in a number of these podcasts, you would have heard me talk about my community, and I want to ensure that you know how you can join that community. Obviously, within these podcasts, there's a limit to the detail I can go into the recording, and of course, a lot of things are very generic. So what if you had access to join me on a Zoom call for 90 minutes every single week in a group coaching environment? You could get your questions answered whenever they come up and learn from other members' questions. Plus, you also get 10 hours of training videos, an HMO refurbishment case study, some sample documents and checklists that will help you run your projects far more effectively. Membership of my community is just £89 a month. You get the first month free, and you can also cancel anytime after that. Plus, as a listener of this podcast, there's a promo code to help you save £20 every single month that you remain a member. So just make a note of VIP discount 20, VIP discount 20, all in capital letters, and put that into the checkout. You'll find the checkout on my website, www.refurbishmentmastery.com. Scroll down the page, you'll find the link for the Project Management Accelerator. Use the promo code VIP discount 20 and you'll be signed up at just £69 a month. I look forward to seeing you in that community very, very soon. Now back to the podcast. Be aware that we're not necessarily talking here about taking an enormous office block and converting it into 25 apartments or anything. I'm thinking here about a lot of entry level kind of projects, the kinds of projects where there's perhaps a shop downstairs, scope for a couple of flats upstairs. Perhaps you can convert the back of the shop into another flat. Nothing too major, because my advice to all of you is you want to take steps forward. You want to be growing yourself. You want to be challenging yourself. You want to be growing your business, of course, but you want to be taking manageable steps forward. You don't necessarily want to be taking enormous steps forward. So learn and grow, stretch yourself and regroup and grow again. So do be careful about taking on too much. Think about whether you have got the sufficient time and expertise to actually deliver the project. I've said all of you are capable of doing it, but not if you've got a full-time career somewhere else and a family with loads of kids to deal with. You probably aren't going to have sufficient time to do these slightly more and slightly larger projects. You'd probably get away with it if you were refurbishing a smaller property, but these projects, these commercial to residential projects, will definitely take up more time, and they will get a little bit more complex at some stages, and they will need you to be a little bit more hands-on, not as far as building them, but as far as navigating some of the challenges. And make sure you've got some expertise. Now, that's where I was saying, in reality, it's good to grow into these. If you've already done a few projects, you've definitely got some expertise. You've got some knowledge, and that's going to help you deliver these that much better and that much easier. So you may need to get some additional support to help you understand the process, and I'm going to come back to that. Come back to that shortly. But in reality, with the right support and sufficient time, all of you listening can deliver these smaller projects. And in fact, you could probably all deliver some bigger projects as well, but there is more risk attached to that. And that's one of the things that you really need to be aware of with these kinds of projects. There are more risks, and you do need to understand the risks. And as a result of there being more risks, you do need to be much more focused on it. If you've not done a commercial to residential conversion before, I wouldn't be doing 3 at the same time. I wouldn't be doing this alongside a full-time day job. I wouldn't be doing this alongside refurbishing several other, even residential properties, because this first one is definitely going to take your time. And because they're generally bigger, because they're generally more complex, there's more moving parts in here. There are naturally more risks. There are more points where something can go wrong. And you need to understand those, and you need to be able to manage those risks away. And sometimes we manage those risks away by working with the consultants, or spending some more time researching things for ourselves and being clearer about what we're delivering, and what our aims and objectives are for of any particular project that we're doing. So don't underestimate the risks attached with commercial to residential buildings. The thing about a lot of commercial buildings is they are very much one-offs. A lot of houses, we all see houses every day of the week. A lot of them are pretty similar to the one next door, the one over the street, the one around the corner. There's only a certain number of different styles of houses around and construction methods for houses. With commercial property, there are so many different construction methods. Some could look like residential houses. They're all brick. They've got a pitch roof on top. They've got a door at the front, some windows. They look just like a house. Others are concrete framed. Others have got steel structures to them. Some of them could be timber framed. Some of them have got asbestos in them. Some of them have got a concrete slabs upstairs, which means it's really difficult to go moving the staircase because you've got to cut a big hole in a concrete slab that's a reinforced structural slab. There's a lot more to consider with these. So, don't go in here, don't go into these too blasé. And again, this ties up with what I was saying earlier on. This is where we need consultants. This is where we need to know that we're putting our budgets together correctly and that we're understanding the risks, because these are bigger projects. There is more risk attached to them. But as a result, if you get it right, you ought to make more profit. And fingers crossed, you can get more money back out when you refinance. And you ought to be able to grow your portfolio or grow your wealth that much faster by taking on these slightly more complex projects. But go into them with your eyes wide open. And because you're going to have to spend money to get these projects off the ground, the whole concept that you can do these projects with no money is a fallacy. You cannot do these projects with no money. You may be able to do them with none of your own money if you can borrow from others. But remember, if you borrow from others, you've got to have a way of paying that back, and you've got to factor in the interest on whatever you borrow from anyone else. But you will need money. You will find with these that even though you may be able to get 100% finance for the cost of the works, that often doesn't include the cost of your consultants. And if it does include the cost of your consultants, it won't include the cost of the consultants normally until the work is actually started on site. So you do need to have cash in the bank to do these projects most of the time. Don't do these without being aware or without knowing where you are financially. I did a podcast episode. I'll talk about that shortly, but I'll talk about the podcast shortly. But I did a podcast episode a month or two ago about a very sorry story of a client I worked with who didn't have any cash, and in the end, their whole property, their whole deal just fell to pieces. Unfortunately, they had to fire sale it, and they lost a huge amount of money. Listen to the podcast to find out how much money they actually ended up losing. It was an eye-watering amount. And the whole problem there, actually, they slipped up at a lot of these. Their first problem was they didn't trust me when I told them the deal didn't stack in the first place. They still went ahead and bought it. They fiddled the figures, managed to get planning permission. They needed planning permission for 13 flats. They only got 12, I think it was. They got one less than they needed, so it still didn't stack, and they started it. And their final thing was they didn't have enough cash to pay to get the project off the ground. So make sure that you're aware that you can't do these with no money. You might be able to do it with none of your own money, but go with caution is the key thing. And the thing about everything I hope you're picking up tonight is these are not projects just to wing it on. If you're converting, if you've done a few entry projects, if you've bought houses, you've refurbished them, this isn't disrespectful, but you perhaps have winged it. And I don't say that's a bad thing at all. You've learned from that process. You've got going. You've got an investment property. That is brilliant. That is, it's got you going and it's got you engaged. Sadly, for some people, in winging it, they mess it up and they've put off for life. I don't want anyone to be put off for life. And in reality, that's why I teach a process to make sure that every project, irrespective of the size, is actually a successful project. And and the thing is, the bigger the project, the more strict we have to be on that process. When I work with property investors and developers on a one-to-one basis, I share with them my project management blueprint. It's got 90 checkpoints in it, 90 points where we make sure that we are taking the right decision, or that we have not forgotten that decision, that we haven't overlooked something that needs considering. 90 points where if we get it wrong, it could cost us time and money if we don't put it back on quickly. So it's really important that you do have some kind of process. And that is what I talk about. You want to be doing things in the right order. I frequently read on social media and hear of people, they say, oh, I had this problem, but I dealt with it. It only cost me a few £1,000s. And my answer a lot of the times is, well, actually, had you known how to do it in the first place at the right time to do it, it wouldn't have cost you anything. It would have just got happened. But because you didn't know you had to do it earlier on in the sequence, you've had to deal with it retrospectively, and it's cost you £2,000. You can't afford too many of those slip up because you don't know the right order. Ultimately, if you've got a process, you have got so much more chance of getting these projects delivered on time and on budget. And as I said at the start, and for those that missed the start, I was saying back then that in reality, if you've refurbished a house and perhaps overspent on it, it's probably not life-changing money. It's a bit of an inconvenience. It's held you back a little bit, but you're off and running. These bigger projects, these more complex projects, instead of things going wrong and costing you a few £1,000s, these bigger projects could cost you tens of thousands of pounds. And the podcast I was just referring to, the people in that particular incident cost them hundreds of thousands of pounds each. So I don't want anyone to be in that situation, and that's why I tell these stories, and that's why I want things to be done. I want everyone to be able to do things correctly. If you've got a process, it will ultimately save you time and money. These are not projects to run in, get started as quickly as possible. You need to slow down and deliver it properly. If you rush into these, that is when things are going to go wrong. So make sure when you're doing that initial appraisal that you're factoring in enough time to get everything right, to get all your ducks lined up. And when you're factoring in that time, you're considering the cost of the finance in that time. As I said, these projects can make you a lot of money, but only if you follow them through correctly. Ultimately, I want everyone to enjoy the experience. I want everyone to get excited about delivering projects and move on to their next one and grow their property portfolios. I've done that myself. I've seen hundreds, probably even more than that, of property investors learn and get this right. But it is about following a process and having some way of ensuring that you don't miss anything out. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a little bit. So do be clear what you need to do. Before I go on any further, I'll just ask you to think about whether you would recommend tonight's webinar to another property investor. Everything I do, or most of what I do, is really word of mouth. I'm here to help property investors deliver projects successfully when they can't afford a project manager. I've got some more tips for you shortly, so I'll share those with you in a little bit. But when you can't afford a project manager and it's you that's project managing, I'm here to help you. I am way, way more competitively priced than if you had a full-time project manager or a project manager on your project. I was a project manager for property investors for a long, long time. I don't do that anymore. I only train and mentor. I deliver this content. I deliver different webinars every single month. I'd be delighted if you just share my name, my contact details with one person that you meet out when you're networking. When someone says they've got problems with builders, they don't understand the process, is something, how can I fix it? How do I make it work? What might it cost? Just send them my way. They can get hold of me, or they can see me on YouTube. They can find my podcast. It's all Refurbishment Mastery. The little logo in the bottom right hand corner is me. I am here. There's free stuff on social media and the podcast. And then, of course, we can have, I don't mind having a free telephone call with anyone, but of course, I can go further as well and support in other ways. Much as I can help out people that are in a crisis, and I really want to help people that are in a crisis, I'd much rather be talking to people before they get in a crisis and guide them and support them. So, congratulations to you guys, and thanks for being here tonight to improve your knowledge on building and refurbishing and some of the challenges associated with that. And I really hope that what you've gained tonight will if nothing else, you recommend this to someone else. I won't be doing this webinar again for a good few months, but next month there will be another webinar on a different topic, and there'll be things in there that everyone can benefit from. These are the 5 mistakes that I regularly see property investors making, although I have got some more tips for you as well. So be careful. Just because it's permitted development does not make it a good deal. Be very, very careful with that. Permitted development does take away some risk, does make some things much easier to do, but it isn't a reason to buy a property. Make sure that you put together a proper budget. Make sure you're not paying too much. These deals cost more than the average residential refurbishment because of the additional building regulations that are imposed for them, and often the complexities of the building in the first place, particularly if they are real industrial type buildings. They can be quite expensive to cut and carve and modify, and even simple things like drainage. In an office block, you might find all the drainages at one end because no one minds walking the full length of the office to get to the toilets. But that's not going to work if you're going to convert that floor area into 3 flats. We now need 3 lots of toilets, etc. So be very, very careful that you're understanding everything that's needed, because some of these can be more complex. Make sure that you use consultants when you need them. Ensure that you're not guessing, cutting corners, trying to hash together reports and things based on AI. You will be caught out, and it will cause you a problem in the longer term. It could cause you the project to fail permitted development because you haven't given sufficient information, or it could obviously cause a delay whilst you get that information through to the planning people. So you avoid that by employing consultants. Make sure that you've got the time and the capacity to do this work. Remember, these are not simple in and out kinds of projects. It is going to take a little bit more of your time to manage it. So just consider whether you can do that, and consider whether you've got some kind of process, some kind of knowledge to start from, so that you can be totally sure that you are going to have success. I've got a few more tips for you, but just before we get to that, I just wanted to let you know, if you don't already know, I am here to help you get it right. I want you to get it right from the first time. I don't want you to go wrong. I don't want you to be put off buying properties, refurbishing them, converting them, adding value, creating lovely homes for our tenants and our guests. I want you to be as excited about delivering these kind of projects as I am. And I'm here to help you do that. I just want to take a couple of minutes to explain my project management accelerator program to you, which is a brilliant place where you can really get started and really start to learn some of this stuff from me. I do it with weekly support calls. We spend at least 90 minutes on a Zoom call every Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, going through what members are doing at the time. So the projects that they're working on, the things that they're looking at, the commercial property they saw at the weekend and they want some guidance and support on, we are talking about that every Tuesday. You can listen into everyone, every call. The calls are recorded. You can hear what other people are talking about. You'll learn from other people. There is massive value in those weekly calls. There's a private Facebook group where you can interact with other people, where you can see the recordings that we make. You can ask your questions in there. You also get 3 20-minute calls with me to help you get started, to make sure that what I'm talking about, it relates totally to your project. And if you don't want anyone on those weekly calls to hear what you're talking about, you can book a private call with me. By the way, when I answer the questions in the weekly calls, there's no names in there. Some people don't want me to share projects. We don't share anything that is private. So it's a trusted environment. But if you have found a cracking deal and you don't want anyone else to know about it, just let me know. I will not tell anyone where it is, and I'm not going to go chasing after your projects. I suspect you're not investing in Dover where I am. So in which case we've got no conflict there at all. And by the way, if you're investing in Dover, it's your deal. I'm not going to nick deals off you. That's not how I operate. As well as this, you'll also get lots of sample documents and checklists, things that you can use straight away. You can literally copy and paste things and get started rather than have to start things from scratch. There's about 10 hours of other training videos, including case studies, other training courses. You get access to all of those as well. There's the case study. There's about 80 videos of an HMO conversion to give you ideas and inspiration on how to create a pretty much top of the range HMO that I did a few years ago. As I said, all of the calls are recorded, so a huge volume of content, and it's not a huge fee to join this. It's a monthly subscription of £89. So you can pay for 1 month, join. If you don't like it, it's £89. It's not a great deal at all. But because you're on tonight's call, I want to give you an opportunity to get it for £69. And again, because I want to make this such a no-brainer for you and take away absolutely all of the risk just for tonight, if you go to that website or you click on that QR code, put in the promo code VIP discount 20, you will get your first month for free. That means you can come to 4 of the weekly support calls without paying anything whatsoever. To get that, you need to go onto that website. It's a special website. It's not the public website. You put in the promo code. It will say the cost is £69. You may be asked to verify that through your credit card, but you will not have any money taken off your credit card. It might show on your credit card as £0 are actually taken, but nothing will be taken. If for some reason something goes wrong and it takes £69 or £89, we'll refund it tomorrow. Do not worry about that. Every now and again, there's a little glitch. Most of the time it works, but some people have a little glitch. So don't worry about that. But I want to make it so easy for you to see the value of that. I have got people that have been paying monthly membership for 4 years. That is the value that's out there. But you don't know me, perhaps. You haven't been on any of these calls, so perhaps you're not sure. So I'm saying to you, there you can get it for free for 4 weeks. I'll put that screen back up shortly. I just want to finish off in the last few minutes with a few bonus tips just to close off tonight's training. Remember that a builder can't really help you until you own the property. You need consultants to help you get this going. Builders are really find it really hard to understand the concept of projects speculatively. That's hard enough in a house. It's even harder with a commercial building. I would not be taking a builder anywhere near a property, a commercial building that you don't own. They really aren't going to give you a lot of guidance and advice. What they give you is going to be free, but it's worth exactly that. It is worth nothing. So save yourself time and effort. If you need a quantity surveyor, look for a quantity surveyor. I can help you with that. If you need support, then that's obviously on the project management accelerator program I've just been talking to you about. But it is not a builder. And that is the one thing that actually is contrary to a lot of people's belief that you need a builder. You definitely do not need a builder. And in many ways, a builder will give you more incorrect information than you need. And again, I'm saying that from experience of finding out, how other people have gone wrong. Remember that it is your property, so you need to make the decisions. Don't let the architects steer you. You need to tell the architect what you want delivered. By all means, take their advice and how they can lay out the building and things, but don't be afraid to challenge what they're saying. Make sure, later on when you're getting builders involved, don't let them choose the fixtures and fittings. Make sure that you make the decisions. Make sure that you ask suitable and good questions so that you've got as much information in front of you so that you can make the right decision. Because ultimately, if all this goes wrong, there's probably only one person who's going to suffer, and that is you. If all of this goes right because you've had your finger on it and you've managed it effectively and you've asked good questions, then it's you that gets the benefit. And with a couple of these deals, this could be life-changing growth in your overall wealth. But ultimately, the one thing that I see tripping up so many people, and I have alluded to this already, is that they actually go into these projects far too fast. You do need to slow down a little bit to be able to ensure that you know what you're doing and things are done properly. If you slow down by 4 weeks at the front end, you will save 8 weeks at the back end, and the cost associated with 8 weeks more commercial finance, which could easily be 10 to 12% per annum. So, do take it slowly, not too slow, of course. There is, time is money. We do need to move on, but don't feel that, you've bought it on Friday and you need builder in there on Monday morning or anything like that. So those are my last three tips. I'm just going to put back up that slide again with a promo code on it. But just to say thanks very much for joining me tonight. There is one more slide after this. As I said earlier, I do a monthly webinar, different topics every month. Look out for next month's topic. There'll be an email out in 3 weeks' time or so, telling you the date and the topic for the next webinar. Have a look at YouTube. Check in on the podcast if that is of interest to you. There is lots of content out there, but don't be afraid to contact me if I can help you anywhere along the way with your property investing journey. There's the details of the Project Management Accelerator Program. It's a no-brainer to join that tonight because you are not committed at all. You can come to 4 calls, 4 Tuesdays, which, by the way, are recorded. So even if you can't come live, you can still hear what's going on. You can still ask questions because you can email them to me beforehand. And you've got 4 weeks to decide whether that is right for you. And even then, I've taken £20 off a month, and that's £20 off a month every single month that you remain. So it's not £69 the first month and then up to 89. No, none of that. £69 forever. Forever and ever, as long as you stay, it's only £69 a month. How many thousands of pounds could you save if you had me to ask those right questions, or that if you had me to guide you? Is it way more than £69? I guarantee it is. Quick question. I don't normally take questions, but just to be clear, the 5 mistakes, because I've just been asked what were the last 2. I'll go through the 5 mistakes. Don't buy a property just because it's permitted development. Make sure you do your own research. Make sure you understand the finances. These projects cost more than the average house refurbishment. Make sure you put together a proper budget and you don't overbid for the deal in the first place. Make sure that you use consultants at the right times. They're there to save you money and time. There are more nuances in these projects that you're going to need to use consultants for than there are in the average house project. Make sure that you don't take on too much. You do need some time to focus on these projects. If you've got a full-time career and a family, you may well not have enough time. So be aware that these are more complex. There's going to be more moving parts. So make sure you have got the time. and make sure that you've got some kind of overview on the process, or someone like me to talk to that is going to help you with that process to make sure that you can deliver that correctly. If you get all of that right, you can make life-changing money from your projects. You can add to your wealth for the longer term. But if you get things wrong, unfortunately, there's a sorry end to the story, and I don't want anyone to be part of that sorry end of the story. So thank you very much for joining me tonight. I look forward to seeing some of you, I should say all of you, on next Tuesday's call. It's free. So click on that QR code now, and I'll definitely see some of you on the call next Tuesday. Otherwise, I hope to see some of you in some of these future webinars going forward later on in the year. Thanks very much for joining me. Thanks for giving up your evening, and I will see you again very soon.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. Please do like, share, and leave a comment where you can. If you need any guidance or advice with anything to do with your refurbishments or conversions, then don't hesitate to reach out. You can book a free call with me by clicking on the link at the top of my website, refurbishmentmastery.com. There's other ways you can contact me in the show notes as well. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.